Before we dive in, hit subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment, because once this story starts, there's no turning back. Red and blue lights cut through the humid Florida night, splashing against the glass front office like warning flares. Patrol cars crowded the narrow parking lot, doors left open, radios crackling with urgency. Inside, the air smelled metallic and sharp, the kind of smell officers never forget. A therapist's office, meant for healing, for whispered confessions and second chances, had become a crime scene. On the floor lay Dr. Hannah Moore, 44 years old, a respected therapist, a mother, a woman who had spent her life helping others survive their darkest moments. Paramedics had tried everything, but the wounds were catastrophic. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, the outcome was already written. Minutes earlier, witnesses reported a man fleeing the building, clothes soaked, face empty of panic. He didn't run like someone afraid of being caught. He moved like someone who had already crossed a line and didn't care what came next. Detective Aaron Cole arrived as officers sealed the office. He'd worked violent crimes for 17 years, but something about this scene unsettled him. No forced entry, no robbery, no random chaos. This was personal, carefully timed, surgical in its cruelty. The receptionist's desk was still lit. A half-finished cup of coffee sat untouched. The wall clock read 8:47 p.m. Investigators learned quickly that Dr. Moore had been wrapping up her final session of the night when the man arrived. He hadn't scheduled an appointment, he hadn't checked in. He'd simply walked through the front door and asked her by name. His name was Evan Cross, a former client. Staff members said Dr. Moore had frozen when she heard it, her face drained of color. She hesitated just a second too long before telling the receptionist to lock the back office door and call 911. She never made it out. By the time police pushed inside, Evan Cross was gone. His car, a dark sedan with out-of-state plates, was already vanishing into traffic. Detectives pulled Evan's file. Terminated therapy, escalating behavior, obsession masked as vulnerability. Notes documented concerns, boundaries set, warnings issued, but nowhere did it suggest this level of violence. At 1:12 a.m., a straight trooper spotted the sedan abandoned near a wooded stretch of highway miles away. The engine was cold, the driver's door stood open. Then came the radio call that changed the investigation. A body had been found. Evan Cross was dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No note, no explanation, just silence. Case closed. At least that's what it looked like. But when Detective Cole returned to Dr. Moore's office the next morning, something gnawed at him. In her private therapy room, behind a framed landscape painting, officers discovered a small wall safe, one that hadn't been listed in her office inventory. It was unlocked, and it was empty. Whatever had been inside, Evan Cross had taken it with him. By sunrise, the office had been scrubbed and sealed, but Detective Aaron Cole couldn't shake the feeling that the truth had slipped out with Evan Cross the night before. Murder-suicide cases were supposed to be clean endings. This one felt staged, too convenient, too quiet. Cole returned to headquarters and ordered a full reconstruction of Evan Cross's life. What they found didn't fit the image of a desperate former client snapping under emotional strain. Evan wasn't unemployed, he wasn't isolated, and he wasn't spiraling. Bank records showed recent cash withdrawals, large ones. Phone data revealed burner numbers activated weeks before the attack. Even more unsettling, Evan had traveled across county lines repeatedly, always late at night, always alone. Whatever had driven him back into Dr. Moore's office wasn't impulsive, it was planned. Cole requested Dr. Moore's full client history. The clinic administrator hesitated. There were files missing, not deleted, removed. Paper copies, not digital. Old-fashioned, deliberate. Then came the first real crack in the case. A junior analyst flagged an anomaly in Dr. Moore's professional background. Before opening her private practice, she had worked as a court-appointed therapist, counseling high-risk offenders referred by the justice system. The work required confidentiality at the highest level, sealed reports, restricted notes, legal protection. One case stood out. 5 years ago, Dr. Moore had evaluated a man connected to an underground fraud ring tied to international money laundering. Her assessment had quietly influenced a plea deal. The man walked free, the ring collapsed, or so everyone thought. Cole cross-referenced names. Evan Cross wasn't just a former client, he had been a cooperating witness. Digging deeper, investigators discovered something Dr. Moore never disclosed to colleagues. She had kept a private file outside official channels documenting inconsistencies in Evan's testimony. Notes suggesting coercion, pressure, a third party manipulating events from the shadows.
That file should have been turned over to authorities. It never was. And now, it was gone. As news of Evan's death spread, another development sent shockwaves through the department. A woman came forward anonymously, claiming she'd been contacted by Evan days before the killing. He'd sounded frightened, paranoid. He said someone was watching him. He told her, if anything happens, it's not just me. She knows too. The she could only mean Dr. Moore. Security footage from nearby businesses was pulled. On the night of the attack, Evan's car hadn't come straight from the highway. It had been parked 2 blocks away for nearly an hour, waiting. For what or who, no one knew. Then Cole received a call he hadn't expected. The surviving client. Still recovering, still shaken, he asked to speak off the record. When Cole arrived at the hospital, the man's hands trembled as he spoke. He said that moments before Evan attacked, Dr. Moore had whispered something urgently, words she'd never meant for him to hear. "I should have destroyed that file," she said. "Now he's back." As Cole left the hospital, his phone buzzed with an alert. An evidence locker had been accessed without authorization. The missing file hadn't vanished into the night. Someone inside the system was looking for it. The unauthorized access set off silent alarms, but whoever entered the evidence locker was already gone. No cameras, no fingerprints, just a timestamp and a chilling realization. This case had never been over. Detective Aaron Cole pushed harder than protocol allowed. He reopened sealed court records tied to the fraud ring Dr. Moore had evaluated years earlier. Buried beneath legal jargon and redacted pages was the pattern he'd feared. False confessions, manipulated testimony, deals made in the dark. Evan Cross hadn't been the mastermind, he'd been the leverage. Dr. Moore had figured it out too late. The private file Evan stole wasn't blackmail in the usual sense. It was worse. It documented how law enforcement, prosecutors, and corporate intermediaries had quietly steered psychological evaluations to collapse an investigation without ever taking responsibility. If that file surfaced, careers would end, reputations would burn, trials would reopen. Evan Cross had come back to Dr. Moore not for revenge, but for protection. Phone pings from Evan's burner told the final story. On the day of the murder, he'd received a call from a number tied to a shell company connected to the original case. Minutes later, he drove to the office. The threat was simple: retrieve the file or everyone pays. Cole finally understood the cruelty of it. Evan had been forced into an impossible choice: take the file and disappear, or let it surface and die anyway. What happened inside the office wasn't supposed to be a massacre. It was meant to be controlled. Something went wrong. Ballistics confirmed Evan's fatal gunshot wound occurred hours after the attack. He hadn't fled in panic. He'd gone to a remote location, waited, and then ended his life exactly as instructed, creating the perfect closing chapter. Murder-suicide. No loose ends. Except one. 3 weeks later, Cole received an unmarked envelope at his home. Inside was a flash drive and a single sheet of paper. "I'm sorry I couldn't save her." The drive contained a copy of Dr. Moore's missing file. She had backed it up. The contents were explosive, enough to trigger internal investigations across multiple agencies. Quiet resignations followed. Settlements were reached without headlines. Official statements cited procedural errors. No one went to prison. Dr. Moore's name faded from the news cycle. Evan Cross was remembered only as a violent footnote. The system moved on. But Cole didn't. Late one night, as he reviewed the file one last time, he noticed something he'd missed before. A timestamp embedded in the metadata. The backup had been created after Evan's death, which meant someone else had accessed Dr. Moore's private records, someone who knew where to look. Months later, a therapist in another state reported a break-in. Nothing stolen, no damage, just one thing missing from her office safe. An old evaluation file. Different name, same sealed stamp. And at the bottom of the report, written in careful ink, were 4 words that froze Cole's blood. Risk. Too much truth. If this story got under your skin, you're not ready for what's coming next. Hit subscribe, because some crimes don't end when the killer dies.